Suddenly, everything sounded very far away, and I felt a throbbing pain explode behind my eyes as words were drawn out of my lips without asking me first. I paid a friend to pass me answers to tests while we took them and to do my homework for me. My own voice sounded foreign to me, and as I tried to stop talking, I realized that I was no longer in control of my body. I felt my back straighten and my legs cross, and I desperately fought to move anything at all, but was held back by that throbbing pain in my skull. "What?" both adults said simultaneously. "Hey!" I tried to shout. "Something's wrong! I didn't say that!" But my words rattled around in my head without leaving my throat. "Shut it, Nimrod!" Korvac spat at me. "I'm getting us out of this, and you'll thank me later." That's when it dawned on me. Korvax had moved from riding shotgun straight into the driver's seat of my body. My chest tightened, or maybe it didn't. I wasn't sure anymore. All I could truly feel was an overwhelming sense of dread and fear wash over me. "Jeffrey, did you really do that?" my dad asked, looking at me with confusion and disappointment plastered on his face. "No, there's something wrong! Dad, help!" I tried shouting, but it was no use. "Yes, and I'm sorry. I just couldn't do 8th grade again. And you're always so busy with work and hardly ever around to help me with schoolwork, so I had to find another way to pass my classes," Korvac said through my teeth. I watched the words hurt my dad as Korvac blamed him for me failing. "Look, kiddo, I know things have been hard since your mom. It doesn't matter," Korvac said hurriedly. "I can just retake the tests on my own, can't I? I think I understand the material now." "I'm afraid it's not that easy, Jeffrey," Miss Fay said, her brow furrowed. "Cheating is a serious offense and needs to be suitably punished." She reached into a drawer on her desk and pulled out an old wooden pen. It looked like an antique from decades, if not centuries ago, and was made by hand. "First, I need you to write out a full confession of what you did." She pushed a piece of paper and the antique pen towards me. I felt my hands move up, reaching towards the desk. I tried to fight them, but it was no use. Korvax had an iron grip on my body, and I just couldn't shake him off. He reached out and picked up the pen, and as soon as he did, a shock of white-hot pain exploded up my arm. I yelped in pain as a flash of green and purple lightning arced between the pen and my hand. Suddenly, the world rushed back to me, mostly, at least. Now things didn't sound so far away, and I rubbed my stinging hand of my own free will. "What the hell was that?" I heard myself say. Korvax wrenched back most of the control he had over my body, but I pushed back with the small foothold I'd gained. "Hey!" my dad shouted, pushing my desk back and standing in between me and Miss Fay. "What did you do to my son?" Suddenly the scent of wood smoke filled the room, and I saw the runes carved along my dad's staff begin to glow with a faint orange light. Miss Fay brought up her hands in a placating gesture, her eyes wide and locked on me. "Old fairy magic," she said. "A spell designed to ward off evil spirits was imbued into that pen centuries ago. It reacted violently to him, which means that that's not your son. Not entirely, at least." "Well, that's not very nice, sweetheart," Korvax hissed out of my mouth. My back arched as Korvax did the psychic equivalent of a suplex to my brain and tore all control away from my body. I was kicked back into the recesses of my mind and became an idle watcher through my own eyes. In them, I saw my dad whirl around to face me and saw him close his eyes and then open them a second later, a ring of blue light encircling his iris. He had opened his third eye and was able to see things as they truly were. And as surprise and fury flashed over his face, I knew that he could see Korvax's essence wrapped around my body like chains. "Let go of my son!" he roared, bringing his staff up to point at me. The smoldering runes flared with light and power as he did. "Not so fast, old man," Korvax said through me. He brought up my hands, and I felt him draw in power. He was using me to cast his own magic. Magic is a complex force that exists in every aspect of the universe, one that I'd only just begun to experiment with. The elemental forces of creation, matter, atoms, all forms of energy, everything has a little bit of magic laced into it. Korvax and my dad drew upon the energy within them and around us, causing lights to flicker and wind to whirl. "Spiritus Torcus!" my dad shouted, swinging his staff around and unleashing a glittering wave of verdant sparks towards me. Korvax hissed something in a foreign and ancient in my mouth, and swept the shower of sparks aside with a rush of power. My dad's spell crumpled under whatever working Korvax had whipped up. I had never been able to do something like that on my own, especially not with without a focus like a staff or wand. "Slow down, geezer. We don't want your darling boy to get hurt in the crossfire, now do we?" Korvax said. With an effort of will, he summoned a jet of flame in my hand and held it up beside my head as he stepped backwards into the rows of desks. Everyone stopped moving as Korvax held the fire next to my temple, maintaining control as the flame so as not to burn me. Not yet, at least. "Let's all just take a moment to talk here, okay?" "Get out of my son," my dad growled, power seething off of him even as he held himself back. "Nuh-uh. This is a hostage situation, Callahan. I make the demands here." Korvax pursed my lips as he thought, still maintaining the fire. I kept struggling in my psychic prison, but I couldn't break free of whatever hold he had over me. "Who are you?" my dad asked. "Oh, what? You don't recognize me? I'm hurt, Callahan, really. And I thought we had something back in '08. Confusion flickered over my dad's expression. Korvax sighed. "Come on, you don't remember? Jersey?" That's when confusion changed to recognition. "You're that thing that got all those warlocks hot and bothered with power back then. Called yourself Korvax." "Ding, ding, ding! We have a winners, ladies and gentlefolk. I had a bunch of little warlocks back then, and you took them away from me. So I've gone and found myself a new one. Only problem is that it doesn't quite have the juice I'm looking for. And you certainly don't want me riding around in your little boy anymore now, do you?" My dad didn't respond. He just clenched his jaw and stayed silent. A quiet affirmation. "Good. Now we can make a deal that benefits both of us. You want your son, and I want to experience the wonders of the world with the proper vessel." Korvax smiled. "What if I take a ride in you instead?" My dad blinked, and I screamed from my mental prison. My dad was one of the most selfless people I knew, and I knew that he would do anything for me, including letting a demon into his body, and I couldn't let him do that, not because of me. "Take a ride in me. How would that work?" my dad asked, which was odd. He knew how something like that worked. It was almost as if he was trying to keep Korvax talking. That's when I took stock of my body and noticed that I was breathing heavily and my knees were shaking. I was exhausted. Korvax was still maintaining the fire he had summoned. On my own, I could barely light a fireplace, let alone conjure a self-sufficient jet of flames. Korvax was exhausting my reserves, but hadn't noticed over the sound of my own voice, or his voice. He was going to run out of power to draw on soon, which meant that he wouldn't be able to deflect another attack from my dad. "Oh, come on, you're the big fancy wizard, master of magic. I thought you pretentious scholarly types claimed to know all about what something like me can do." Korvax coughed, and his balance wavered. "What the?" he panted. The fire in my hand began to flicker and die. My reserves of power had finally run dry. "What in the hell?" Korvax yelled, fear and confusion evident in his voice. Without any witty one-liners or preamble, my father shouted his incantation again and hurled a second wave of sparks at me. The spell slammed into my body as Korvax collapsed to one knee, and it washed over me. Suddenly, it felt like my whole body had fallen asleep with that tingly static feeling as the sparks worked their way through me. I fell backwards, bowled over by a surprisingly strong wave of force, and landed on my back with full control over my body and restored in an instant. I felt fatigue batter me like a hammer, and every part of me was racked with a dull, aching pain. And behind me, there was a screech. I looked back to see a writhing purple mass struggling within a sparkling green net that had folded in on itself to create a sack to hold Korvax. My father rushed over to it, pushing desks aside, and hastily drew a circle on the ground around it with a piece of chalk he'd pulled from his coat. After the circle was drawn, I heard the quiet pop of magic sealing it shut, and my dad began to mutter an incantation while Korvax struggled as helplessly as I had moments ago. Within seconds, the circle lit up in bright light with a deafening whoosh, and like a flushing of an airplane toilet, Korvax and his prison vanished into the thin air. After the threat had been dealt with, my dad whirled around to tend to me, frantically searching me for wounds of any kind. Miss Fay grabbed a bottle of water and rushed to my side as well. "Hey, Jeff, kiddo, you okay? Talk to me, kid," my dad said. "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay, Dad," I said. He smiled and leaned down to hug me. I hugged him back and felt a lump form in my throat as tears began to fall from my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm sorry," I cried. He hugged me tighter. "Hey, it's all right, kiddo. It's okay. I'm just glad you're okay." He leaned away from me and looked at my face as I wiped snot away from my nose and tears from my eyes. "What happened, Jeff? Why didn't you tell me you were in trouble?" "I was scared," I said, looking down at the ground. "I was failing and I didn't want you to know because I didn't want to disappoint you or make you mad, so I looked through your books and found a knowledge spirit, or demon, I guess, and used it. None of this was supposed to happen. I'm sorry." My dad held onto my shoulder and moved down so that he could make eye contact with me. "Hey, listen to me. You don't have to be scared about disappointing me, ever." His eyes welled up with tears too. "I know I haven't been around much lately, and that's on me. But we're a team, right? 2 wizards against the world. It's gonna be okay." He hugged me again, and I felt all the tension and fear I had melt away. After I got myself together, I looked to Miss Fay. "I'm sorry to you too, Miss Fay. If you have to fail me, I understand." She smiled at me, sadness coloring the expression. "Well, you did cheat, sort of, but I'm sure we can work something else out in another meeting. For now," she looked around at the trash classroom, "I think I have to clean up, and you two should get home. We'll work out a new solution tomorrow, okay?" She held out a hand and helped me up. I nodded, ashamed, but hopeful. My dad and I started to leave, but I stopped as a thought struck me. "Hey, Miss Fay," I called. She looked up from the desks she had started to put back in place. "How did you know that I had cheated using, well, something weird?" She smiled, a twinkle in her eye. "Maybe because you're not the only one here with some experience on the other side of the fence." She winked and nodded to the door. "Now go on. Get some rest, little wizard. We'll talk soon." And with that, we parted ways for the day, and my dad and I drove home without an unwanted passenger sitting in the car. And that is A Demon Did My Homework. Thank you so much for listening and reading. I very much appreciate the time, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care.